Hi guys! So after our two-part series on lithium batteries in general and their installation, we got some really good questions from all of you. We were going to include these questions at the end of the second video, but we simply had too many of them and all of them were so good. We had questions on price, on environment, on some technical things that I can't even answer. So they're all really good and we've decided to make a second video. As I said in the last two videos, I'm no electrician, but I did help found the battery company of the batteries which we installed on Polar Seal. So without further ado, here are some of the questions. So Lars asks, in Norway there are a lot of electric cars. This is true. I can see in the classified ads that old car batteries from Tesla and other brands are sold. Would it be possible to reuse batteries from cars? This is a really great question, and I've seen this on the forums before. The answer is yes, but should you? I would be skeptical. And the reason for that is the chemical composition of car batteries are different than the chemical composition of boat batteries. So, for instance, Tesla car batteries are made of nickel, magnesium, cobalt, which is a lot different and it has a much higher risk of starting on fire if there's an accident than lithium iron phosphate, which is found in boat batteries. So you could do it. You're not going to get as much energy out of those batteries because they're used. They're going to be expensive and you're going to have to reconfigure them for your boat. So with all of that on top of the additional safety concerns, I would personally veer away from doing that, but of course it's something you could try if you wanted to. Jules asks, what are the considerations of the environmental impact of lithium ion? Where or in Earth does lithium come from? Is it environmentally and sustainably sourced? Are there some sources in some parts of the world better than others? I've heard stories of damage done to the Earth in search of lithium, but could of course be fake news from the petroleum industry. Please enlighten me. This is a fantastic question. So anytime there's a rare earth metal, lithium or cobalt or any of that inside a battery, there's only going to be specific places in the earth that we can find it. Lithium generally comes from China. There's lithium that's found all over the earth, but that is where it primarily is sourced, and that's because of China's lax regulations on environmental impact of mining. But lithium is not the only chemical found in these lithium batteries. Specifically with another type of chemistry, which is like what found in the Tesla car, the cell phone, which is containing cobalt. So cobalt's really only found in one part of the world, and that's in the Congo. And there's a lot of fighting going on right now in the Congo because of cobalt and some other metals and materials that they have available to them, which is not found really anywhere else in the world. My company is looking at some renewable sources that can be sourced locally in the US for lithium batteries, but the research on that takes a while and is ongoing. So I hope that answers your question. You also had a second question, which is also very good. When you talk about number of cycles of a battery, when you compare standard lithium ion, can you explain what a cycle is? So a cycle is any time that you take the battery off a charging source, you deplete it a ways, and then you charge it back up. So in your example, you said that maybe you only use 10% of the battery. That could be a cycle. If you use the battery down to use 90% of the battery, that could also be a cycle. Lithium is very similar in lead acid in that if you only use part of the battery, so let's say you only use 10% of it every time you go out, the life cycle is going to increase even more. So we talked about having 2,000 cycles for a lithium battery. That's if you use it 90% every single time. If you only use it 40% every single time, you're going to get 5,000 or 6,000 cycles out of that battery, maybe more. So yeah, cycles anytime you stop the charging and then charge it back up. So it may be 10% or maybe 90%. That's what it is, and hopefully that answers your question. So the next question is actually from two different people, so I'll read them both. Nelson asks, I heard lithium are dangerous if they get wet and cannot be placed in the bilge. Is this a myth or is it true? And Silas asks, are lithium batteries affected strongly by the marine environment if for any reason saltwater ingress occurs? So just like any battery, you do not want to get them wet or submerge them in water, specifically salt water, and that goes for lithium as well. So you do not want to have salt water on them. You could place them in a bilge as long as that bilge is primarily dry. If you have a constantly wet bilge, I would advise against it. And I'd also make sure that those batteries are in a box anytime they're in any place in the boat. That would be my suggestion. The marine environment in general is not a problem. So if you have your batteries in a box and there's a top on it, and you know, we all know that there's a little bit of salt in the air while we're out sailing, that's not going to be a problem. Maybe just clean off the terminals every once in a while like you would with lead acid. But generally, it should be okay. Eric asks, how many lithium batteries can you wire in parallel with an integrated BMS? This is a great question, and we just had this come up the other day. So you can wire, theoretically, as many lithium batteries you want in parallel as possible. You could have 1, you could have 100, that's okay. The thing to remember is the BMS. So I'm going to give you a situation. Let's say I have 2 lithium batteries wired in parallel. Each lithium battery has the ability to discharge 100 amps. So that means we have 200 amps of total discharge available to us. If, let's say, I put a load on our batteries of 200 amps, I max it out, and let's say the BMS shuts down one of the batteries because it senses something's wrong, or I don't know, there's a short or something, then the second battery is going to pick up that full load of 200 amps. Now that battery's BMS should also shut down the battery, but maybe it doesn't, and it could damage that battery permanently. So that's something to be aware of if you're running high loads on parallel batteries. On Polar Seal, we're going to have 4 batteries in parallel, so we'll have 400 amps of power available for discharge. Our policy is to use only 200 max, which is a lot of power available. I don't think we'll do that very many times. Most of the time we're pulling 10 to 20 amps if we're sailing at night. And then on the charge side, we're limiting it to 60 amps. So again, we'll have plenty of space in case something does happen to one of the batteries. Mike Cat asks, how many do I need for an average 40-foot boat? And Larry asks, how many batteries are enough? And should I go 1 or 2 batteries more for future power needs? How many appliances can a battery handle? This is actually a very complicated question, and it could go on for hours about it. But what you need to do is do an energy assessment for your boat. So go through and figure out how you operate your boat day to day. So how you operate it under sail in the day, how you operate it at sail at night, how it is at anchorage, and then figure out how much power you're using. Based on that, you can start to size your battery bank. There's some really good books out there on the topic. The Voyager's Cruising Handbook has a really awesome section on how to do an energy assessment, and then from there you can size your battery bank. We kind of oversized ours here because there's like 3 hair dryers and a straightener that Sophie needs to use, so we decided to have an extra couple.
Is that why?
So it's really hard for me to give you an answer one way or another because every boat is different. I would suggest doing an energy assessment and then also figure out how much solar you have on your boat or wind power you have on your boat and build that into the equation as well.
For the record, we only have 2 hair dryers on board.
The next question. Frank asks, I understand Ryan is part of a company who makes those batteries in the US and was wondering how you get them from the US to Europe and how much you pay in possible import duties. Also wants to know if I can tell him what is the upside and downside to comparing, let's say, Victron's LFP batteries. So we have 2 parts here. Dakota Lithium has actually set up a drop shipping facility in Europe, so it's pretty easy for us to get batteries in Europe. We actually have an EU website, which is eu.dakotalithium.com. The prices on that site have built in all the import duties, the VAT, so that's all covered. Some of the batteries we still ship from the US, but it's all covered there. I believe the import duties into Europe is around 2% for lithium batteries, and then VAT matters on which country you're in. So we can definitely get batteries to Europe. Second question though is a little bit more complex. What is the upside and downside to comparing, let's say, Victron's LFP batteries? So Victron is a really good company. We have a lot of Victron gear on our boat. I think they make really good chargers and battery monitors. Their batteries, their lithium batteries though, are a little bit different than our lithium batteries and other drop-in replacement batteries that are on the market. Victron's batteries do not contain a BMS inside, so the BMS is actually outside the battery, and use a number of communication cables to connect the batteries to that BMS, and then the BMS is actually able to connect to other equipment in the system. So it can talk to the MPPTs and the chargers, and the benefit of that is if something happens to your batteries, it can shut down the whole system. So not just shut down the batteries, it can shut all the chargers down, and shut down the load as well. So that's a nice feature with them. The downside to it is that the BMS is outside, so there's more expense involved with the system and ultimately more complexity because you have more cables running around and more little systems that can fail, as opposed to having a BMS inside the battery. Another positive for Victron would be that if the BMS fails, it can just be replaced very easily. Integrated BMSs, it's a little bit more complex to have the top come off. You have to actually change the circuitry inside, so that would be something a professional would need to do. So there's pros and cons to both. Generally, the batteries with the built-in BMS are a little bit cheaper than having something with an external BMS. Samuel in Sydney asks, lithium seems to be a great solution for stopping brownout when high load items such as a bow thruster or a windlass hit the power backbone hard. How much issue or problem with lithium solution for both high power systems and lithium itself? Can I use lithium for a starter battery?
So first off, I have a question. What is a brownout?
So what we're describing here is if I use a high load item, let's say something with 100 amps, maybe sometimes you see the lights in the boat or the power go kind of whoop, or maybe a piece of equipment doesn't function right because the voltage gets too low. That would be an example, and I think that's what they're talking about here. This is one of the big benefits of lithium. Because lithium's voltage curve stays very flat until the end, you don't typically have those brownout situations. So you can run high load items and it's not going to affect the voltage of the rest of the system, as opposed to lead acid where the curve kind of just goes down the whole time. So if you have a 50% full battery, the voltage is going to be a lot lower than if it was 100%. So that is a great plus to lithium batteries, and it's something we're excited to try out here on Polar Seal. The other question was, can I use lithium for a starter battery? You absolutely can, but my suggestion is to use a lithium purposely built starter battery. So they make lithium batteries that are built for starting and high amperage discharge, and BMSs that go with that as well. So find a lithium battery that is built for that, is my suggestion. So Lars asks, lithium is relatively new and prices tend to drop after some years. Any thoughts? And Mike Cat asks pretty much the same question, how fast would the prices drop? I wish I was a fortune teller and could tell you exactly when and how much they'd drop, but I can't. I would say we've seen them drop already over the last 3 or 4 years, and I would guess over the next 10 years they'll drop significantly. I would anticipate that lithium will always stay a little bit more expensive than lead acid, and that has to do with the complex circuitry that's involved inside of having an integrated BMS or other systems. So I wouldn't ever expect to see them on par, but you definitely will see them come lower. So if you want to wait a while, you might get lucky, and yeah, prices will drop. Okay, Samuel and Sydney asked another question. Solar as a solution for charging batteries is a great idea and really gives good understanding of a cycle. Sun up starts a new charge cycle until flow is met. How would something as a how would something as a, I'll just skip it. How would something as a wind generator impact lithium as microcycles with wind gusts? Is on or off and the cycle times become nearly meaningless? Any issues? I would say with most wind generators, you use a regulator just like you would use a MPPT or a solar charger. But your question is really that the wind generator is going to be spinning all the time, even through the night. So how do you add up the cycles? Well, I guess you're always going to have a little power in and a little power coming out. So I don't know how to answer that in a really good way, but generally there shouldn't be any issues connecting a wind generator to the lithium batteries and dealing with any type of safety thing or any type of cyclage issue. So I don't see that as a problem. Will any type of solar panels charge them? Are they all the same? I think some have what looks like a computer on top of them. So most solar panels should charge lithium batteries. It shouldn't be a big deal, but remember to put a regulator between the solar panels and the lithium batteries. You should do that for all batteries. That's a good way to protect your batteries and the solar panels. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. You can send us an email or even drop us a line on Facebook. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you like this series, please consider subscribing. And again, we love to hear from all of you. So if you have anything else, please leave a comment. And until next time, bye-bye.